God, we just thank you for the beautiful morning. Chilly, but man, it was just a gorgeous morning. Thanks for what the pastor had to say during the first hour. We pray that you would give him your voice again as he gets prepared to speak. And Lord, that as we discuss Job this morning, that you'd give me your words, that you'd keep me mostly on track, and that it would be an enjoyable conversation, and that the things I've studied would have meaning and purpose as we try to understand this book a little bit deeper than all the things we just have heard off pulpits and never maybe taken the time to explore. And I just ask this in your son's name. Amen. All right, so I have to start with a bribe. I've held this for 2 years. This was a hat from the very last AT&T Byron Nelson. And I was going to ask him beforehand, but I'm going to do it anyway, that I was going to ask him if I could pick on him, because the first thing I thought, so I've stood in front of... For permission. Well, so I have stood and I have spoken to thousands of people. It's what I do for a living. I run IT services for very large corporations. And so I'm used to dealing with CEOs. I get yelled at by everybody. I will tell you, and I've spoken to the men's group with 60 to 80 guys here multiple times. I have shared my faith a zillion times. Teaching this class made me as nervous as I have been in a long time, because the problem is I sit under all you guys that teach regularly, and I'm like, I've been prepping for a month plus, and I still am not where you guys are. So I would ask for a little bit of grace. Of course, give me your feedback. I've got some interesting comments that I am sure will provoke a few opportunities. I will take these readers on and off. Age has finally caught up to the point that I cannot read my text. I guess if I had Christy hold it, I could probably make it out. But otherwise, thank you, brother. Skylar, that's encouraging right up front, and I appreciate that. All right, so let's see. Oh, and let me just give you a kind of quick overview of what we're going to do. And then we'll get into the slides. But Job, we've all heard it preached, parts of it. You got Job, you got Satan coming to God and going, hey, let me pick on your dude. And then you got him going through everything. We're going to talk about some of that today, and how he is put under the gun, if you will. And then we'll talk, well, I've got a slide for it. So let me start here, because I'm already doing my normal thing. All right. This is how most people see Job.
Double kill, triple kill, overkill, kill, tacular, kill, atrocity, kill him, jar, kill, catastrophe.
Okay, that is how most people that open and start reading, because by chapter 2, you're going, poor Job, what in the world is this guy going through?
Yeah.
And thus, well, she didn't call me, so it's okay. Or it'd have been an NASB. So, oh no, I thought it was the other Scott teaching. I have to say, yes, it is rude if you get up and leave now. So you just need to understand that it was not the other Scott. If you'll endure with me though for 45 minutes to an hour, that's all I'm going to go. I'll try to make it enjoyable and have some insight to it. Everyone is, of course, welcome to share their opinion, except for Thomas, as I believe he's been waiting to get me back, because at men's breakfast he said, I have been working on this particular phrase. That's not what it says in my Bible, because I may have used that 100 times in this room. So we're going to do a 4-week overview of the man, the myth, and the legend. We'll answer those. But as I say, it's the uplifting story of Job. So let's dive in. If it'll advance. There we go. So what am I going to talk about for these 4 weeks? So today we're going to do a general overview of the book. In week 2, next week, we'll talk about Job's so-called friends. Then we'll get into Job would like to say a few words. And then in week 4, God will show up and take the mic and then drop it. So as you can see, I'm sorry if I annoy you with my thirst for knowledge in this thing. So I had a lot of fun with the pictures. Y'all just going to... I'm way more irreverent than the rest of you guys. So, all right. So tackling week 1. We're going to do the general overview. We're going to talk about when did this take place? When When did Job walk the earth and go through this? If you believe that he was a real person, we'll talk about that too. We're going to talk about where was this? Where in the world did it take place? Are there any clues around who may have written this? And by the way, when we get to that, there is nothing that I could find. I looked at every reputable scholar. I mean, I read lots of books. In fact, I didn't bring them all. I had like a big stack I was going to stack up here. I don't bring them all. And just all the books that I looked through, and I mean, everything from Swindoll to Piper, and there is no authoritative, this is who wrote it. But I have some options that I want us to explore. Well, Ryrie's wrong then, because he's guessing. There is nowhere that it says.
Uncertain. I haven't heard that yet.
What's his bucket was what I was going to put up here, but.
Thomas thinks it follows.
Well, I have some really interesting comments that I put together from all the stuff I looked at. So, and then we're going to talk about, was Job a real person or just some really good wisdom literature? Or in my opinion, both. And I'll talk through why I believe that. Okay, so overview. How we're going to proceed on this is pretty much everything I read and I looked at is why do bad things happen to good people? Who has not heard Job spoken basically of why do bad things happen to good people? That's the first thing I can ever remember. All the books speak to it, almost everything that I read. I will say that it's a thick read, but I actually really dug this. A Man of Heroic Endurance, Job by Charles Swindoll. It reads more like a book than a study book, which is why I actually made it through pretty much all of it. I picked up John MacArthur's because it's very thin, and and it's actually done as a study. He has questions and things that made me think some. And then also I picked up John Piper's book because it also was thin. And I mean, I was like through this and like, it's even got pictures and this was so on my level. So I recommend this for anybody who really doesn't want a heavy read, but it's really pretty good because it's all about the misery of Job and the mercy of God. Really good read. So that's some of the text. I've got some others at the house that I didn't bring because I skimmed through them after I bought them and went, there's no way this thing's dusty as I can possibly believe. So, Job, and why I like this book. So, when life is chucking rocks at my head, as I'm sure it does with all of you, I can promise you, if you'll jump in and just read, I don't know, the first chapter of Job, which we're going to do here in a little bit, your life will seem your problem will seem so much smaller. Or you jump into where he and his buddies are having a chit chat, and you'll be like, I got some really good friends. Because I've never called Thomas or talked with Nate on a Friday morning, and the response is, well, you must really be a bad person, and you're an idiot, and you've done something wrong, and what is it that you're hiding from me? I mean, it's none of that. So it makes a big difference for you, or for me. So let's slide. I'm on 5. All right. So the first thing I want to get into is a little bit of text, and that's the whole thing around. I'm still in the overview. Sorry, I'm a slide ahead of myself. So we're going to have Job persecuted by Satan. We're going to read that here in just a minute, and then we're going to get into Job and his friends' discussion and speculate on the reason that he experiences his discussion. That's going to be week 2 and 3. So we'll have his buddies and then him. And then Job 38 to 41 will be God speaks with Job and reveals his greatness to him. And for me, this was the reminder of I'm God and you are not. That'll be week 4. And then the restoration of Job, because I think a lot of times we know it, but we really don't look at how God makes right for what Job is fixing to go through that we're going to read together. All right. Okay, so when. Slide 6. I have notes, so you'll be pretty impressed. All right, can somebody grab, I've got my notes off from it's fantastic. I printed the wrong set of notes. That's okay. This is like version 1, but that's all right. All right, so everything that I was looking at and reading, as you can see by the time scale here, and I'm going to go to their side because I can't see. As you see, he was way back here with all the other old dudes. Somebody named some of the patriarchs that would have been his contemporaries. Abraham. What else? Nobody else? All of them. I mean, because of where Job is, if this is in chronological, he was living back in the 2100 to 1800 BC time frame. Everybody collaborates that, but one of the biggest ones that I found is one. If you go to Job 42:16, it talks about after all these trials. Remember, he had grown kids that we're going to talk about here in a minute that have passed. After all those trials, and God restores him, he lived another 140 years. So we're figuring that this dude lived 200 plus years, which has to put him in that time frame, because as we move forward through the Old Testament, that lifespan gets clipped significantly. And therefore, I mean, I couldn't find a single reference in anything I read or anything that I looked at that said once we got past those guys that anybody was living 200 plus years. And based on that, he had grown kids that were off partying that we're going to see get taken out. He had to be minimum 50 plus 140. So that's why I say we're talking 200 plus years of life. And then Job 1:3, and then again in 42:12, it talks about the measurement of wealth at that time. So if you go back and look at how they talk about Abraham or any of the old guys back in this part in Genesis, Exodus, it was all about land, cattle. They'd say, oh, he had 500 head of sheep, and he had even they had this many horses, and everything wealth-wise. It wasn't, hey, he had a bank account with $1 million in it. He had 400 pieces of silver. None of that. It was all about your wealth was expressed through the ownership of land, cattle, how much you owned physical things. So again, that matches up and really easily puts Job way back here with the other old dudes. All right. And this was kind of cool because some of you weren't here, I was telling while we were chit-chatting right before we got started, is I had Cliff, which meets with Nate and I on Friday mornings, had talked about he and his wife were doing a chronological Bible. And I've never done that. And so I asked Kristen, she bought me one for Christmas. And so I was going back over some of the stuff I was looking at. And it was really interesting how looking at where Job lands, it's like Genesis, Job. I mean, it's right up front, which really puts it in context better. Because if you're reading through the Bible just in the way it's set up that they put it together, Job's way off, but he's really physically from back there. And we're gonna talk about the when, some more about the when. Now, given the location, some of the text, as it says, I lean that Job was not a Jewish person. I couldn't find hard evidence either way, but given he lived during the patriarchal times and where he lived, there's a good argument for non-Jewishness. Definitely not an Israelite, though, since that had not even been established yet. And then insert an argument. Oh, I didn't know I put that in there. Insert an argument for my friends in the room who feel that I'm totally wrong here. Are there any opinions here? Because I have to tell you, guys and gals, this one I really struggled with because until I started reading into what some of these guys said, because it's in the Bible, this dude had to be a Jew. I mean, he had to be Jewish. My mind went there. And so everything I kept reading, I was going, well, he didn't live in their land. He did know God, so wouldn't he have to be Jew? Well, not necessarily. Anybody have an argument for or against that? Because I'm pretty comfortable. I know he wasn't Israelite because Israel hadn't been established at this point. But whether he was Jewish or not, I lean towards him not being Jewish. It even talks about, and I didn't put any notes here, but it talked about that he was the priest of his family, that he took care of what went on with his wife and kids, that he would offer sacrifices for their sins as the priest of his family. And I was going, man, that doesn't fit everything that I've read. So yeah, please.
What do you mean by Jewish if there was no Israel?
Well, because he didn't live where they lived. So that's the other reason. He was not part of that Jewish community. He lived in Uz, which we're going to get into. Where the heck is that in a minute? But he was separate, but he knew who God was. So I couldn't find that connection. But because of where he lived and that they had him listed as a patriarch and the way he was situated from a physical, he was close enough that he'd know who it was and could know who God was, but he wasn't part of that community because nothing in Job talks about that. Yeah, please, Steve.
Yeah, I listened to an audio overview. Just
Oh, great. Thanks. No, I'm just good for you. Yeah.
30 minutes, so you're very, very short. But the author of that said the same thing, that he was an Israelite, but he wasn't, a Jew. I mean, he was not an Israelite. But he knew God.
Yeah, that was everything that I was thinking. Yeah, please.
I would say the difference is he's pagan or does he believe in God? I wouldn't even go to the Jewish.
That's fair. Yeah, he definitely believed in God. That's fair. But they were God's children. That's true. I mean, at the end of the day, I can make some really interesting arguments if we all are descendants of Adam, therefore. But
believe about Melchizedek.
don't start. I have no idea. This is Job. I've never read the book of Melchizedek, so I'm not sure.
Characters
Sure.
that had a relationship with God, perhaps before Abraham.
Sure, and this had to have been before Abraham. It's definitely before any of the Mosaic. There's no covenant set down. Therefore, nobody was Israelite. But the distinction that I was really wrestling with, and the reason I put it in with my little comment is I couldn't come to a good answer on this one, other than he's definitely apart from the nation that God is putting together at the time. Is that fair to say? Because he was living in the same times as those guys, so he was around, but he wasn't part of, at least that I could find. Fair?
So it is written in Hebrew, right? Which wouldn't even exist in Abraham's time.
Fair. There you go.
So if it was written in his time, which I'm not sure, that's probably the case.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that too, because I've got two options that I came out with. Yeah. Yeah. So, very cool. All right. So, all right. So I think that's everything I want on that one. That's all my notes. So let's get into the meat of the first couple. So, how long did Job endure and suffer? Could I get somebody to read Job 1 through 12? Oh, y'all like my picture? That's probably what was going through his head after he get into a bit of this. Anybody? I got a whole room of readers. I know you know how to read. Job 1 through 12. I would love for you to.
It is New American Standard.
I love you. You married a good one there, brother.
There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless, upright, fearing God, and turning away from evil. And 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. His possessions also were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and very many servants. And that man was the greatest of all the men of the east. And his sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And it came about, when the days of feasting had completed their cycle, that Job would send and consecrate them, rising up early in the morning and offering burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "Perhaps my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job did continually. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "From roaming about on the earth and walking around on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? For there is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil." Then Satan answered the Lord, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge about him and his house and all that he has on every side? You bless the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But put forth your hand now and touch all that he has. He will surely curse you to your face." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your power, only do not put forth your hand on him." So Satan departed from the presence of the Lord.
All right, so here we are, and I want to stop here for a second because there's an area that, again, I thought I'd bring some of these things that I really wrestled with to this group, because if I'm going to find somebody that has a different spin, it's probably in this room. So How did the sons of God, and it's referenced also, where did I put that note? It's also referenced in Genesis 6:2, where it talks about the sons of God came and said, hey, those ladies you made, God, are really pretty. And it's the whole start of the Nephilim. We will not be going down that path because we would need a whole lot of time to unpack, and it's a lot of it would be speculation anyway. But that's the only other big reference that I really saw that it was maybe the same group. So who are the sons of God that he's referencing here? What do y'all think? Angels, that's where I was. Angels and demons based on Satan coming alongside, but the sons of God were created beings of some kind, but I'm thinking angels. Anybody else have any other thoughts on this? And I don't have a gotcha here. Trust me, I think it's angels too. But has anybody else heard anything else or read that any differently?
I think it's similar to when God is looking for somebody to lead Ahab into war so that Ahab will die, and it's like, who will convince Ahab to do that? And somebody raises his hand and says, I will do it. And God's like, how will you do it? And he's like, I'll be a deceiving voice I'll be a deceiving spirit in the voice of his prophet. And it's like, go and
interesting. Sure. Nope. I got it. Any other thoughts on that?
So they're not regular humans.
Definitely not.
Because they have access to God.
Yeah. I do find it interesting that it's not used. It's very, very seldomly used. I found Genesis in this, and I think there was one other reference, and I didn't write it down, where it talks about the sons of God.
Bene Elohim.
I wrestled with it on myself because as a believer in Jesus Christ, it talks about I'm now grafted into that. I am one of his kids. I mean, he is my Abba Father. And so that he called his angels sons of God, which I was like, okay. And I know what the difference is because he redeemed me when I deserved nothing. I get it. He created them specifically as worshiping entities and to do his bidding, whatever that might be. But I did find it struck me, I don't know about anybody else, but when it said sons of God, my first thought is, well, wait a second, that's me and all my other believers because we've been covered by the blood of Jesus Christ, and therefore we have access to the throne and to his ear and to his love and all that stuff. And he's calling these guys sons of God, but they don't have the same privileges as this son of God. So I don't know if that made anybody else go, go ahead.
My note says that sons of God in the sense that they are his creation.
Sure, and I found that too. But it's that use of words in two different places, the same one, and then the other one where they come down and you get, again, back into the Nephilim, which I'm not going to go any further than just the name, because that's a really odd. I looked at it for a little bit and I was like, no, if I start down that path, we're going to be here the whole day just on that. All right, so after that, we've got Job's terrible, horrible, really bad day with his wealth and family. So I'm going to read just the rest of one because I think we need to get this in our head. And this is a day. We're trying to figure out a time frame here. Day one, to take on from after Satan left the Lord's presence. It says, one day when Job's sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, while the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, the Sabaeans swooped down and took them away. They struck down the servants with the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Well, while he was still speaking, another messenger came and reported, God's fire fell from heaven. It burned up your sheep and the servants, and it devoured them. I alone have escaped to come and tell you. While that messenger was still speaking, yet another came and reported, the Chaldeans, did I say that right, Chris? Chaldeans, okay. I've been calling them the Chaldeans the whole time. Formed 3 bands, and they made a raid on your camels, and they took them away. They struck down all the servants with the sword. I alone have escaped. I know this is kind of repetitive. While still speaking, another messenger came and reported, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. Suddenly, a powerful wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on the young people, and they all died. I alone have escaped you. Job stood up, tore his robe, shaved his head, fell to the ground, and worshipped, saying, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will leave this life. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Through all this, Job did not sin or blame God for anything. Full stop. Job's terrible, horrible, really bad day. So, wealth and family loss. Satan, with God's permission, tears Job's life apart. All the livestock, everything's either burned, stolen. His kids are the last thing. How many respond the way Job did? Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I've read chapter 1 too, because that's usually where if I'm really just need a pep talk from God, which I know sounds weird, I'll read this and go, okay, you haven't allowed that to happen to me, and I'm thankful. When I get to the end of this and we talk about whether Job was a real person or this is just a wisdom story, I actually struggled more on this than any of the rest of these passages, that a person could endure all of that and still worship. I mean, it uses the word worship. Does anybody else's text use a different word than worship? I couldn't. I've got several at home, and I looked at all, and they were all worship. I don't know about you. I struggle with this part about Job and him being a real person that we'll get to in a minute, just because of how do you go through that calamity? Because I know some of you guys, and y'all are buddies. Y'all know me. There is no way on this planet that I think I could respond. Now, maybe once I've let it sink in, but it doesn't say a week later he came back and told God, hey, I love you. See me through this problem. No, he hears 4 dudes. They just keep walking in the door and going, yeah, all your camels got stolen. Hey, your sheep burned up. And we're going to talk about fire from heaven in a minute, because that one bugs me. And oh, hey, they stole all your stuff. Oh, by the way, a tornado, hurricane, some great wind. So I living in Texas and lots of friends from Oklahoma and stuff, my brain goes tornado. Some F5 ripped through, knocked the whole house down. It crushes them. All in a day. And at the end of this, Job says, I came naked in. You give it and you take away. I'm going out naked. I love you, Lord. Or whatever else, because I have a feeling there's more too. I mean, through weeping, and he's torn. I mean, Jesus took time. He shaved all his head. I mean, he is at the lowest of despair. Because you take my money, you deal with all that, burn my Corvette. I may be a little unhappy, but I got my wife and kids, and we'll rebuild it. Okay. Oh, and by the way, his wife's not including that. We're not going to talk about her at all. I've got a whole section with the friends and his response. She's in there that we're going to discuss later. But I really wrestled with he goes through all this and he worships the God of heaven. Does he deserve worship? Absolutely. In all instances? Absolutely. Am I as righteous as Job? Not in any shape, sense, or form. And what Wendy was reading, if you read back, it says he's my number one. This is my dude. And Satan's like, yeah, but that's because you take really good care of him. You're nice to him. He's never wanted. And so strips it all away. All right, so let's talk about the one piece, though. I want to ask about what you think when it says fire from heaven consumed. So since God gave Satan the ability to destroy everything he has without touching him yet, at this point, is that Satan going back to God and going, yeah, drop fire? Or did he just give him free reign to drop fire from heaven? I wrestle with this because we've seen fire from heaven used other places where, a priest goes, yeah, you should yell louder. And they cut themselves. They can do all the bad guys. They can't get their God to respond because he doesn't exist. And he has a simple prayer of, yeah, God, would you drop some fire on this? And it consumes the bull and consumes the altar, consumes the water. My thought after that is it's just a piece of black obsidian from where the heat of God's fire. And this sounds, because it says it devours them all. I put those somewhat in context that we've got fire from heaven that has supernatural heat ability because it devours them. If you devour something, there's nothing left. If I finish a steak, there's nothing on that plate. Any concern, or not concern, any thoughts, though, when he says that fire from heaven? So Satan had opportunity to call down fire from heaven because God had given him the ability to basically take out in any way, shape, or form? What do y'all think?
Revelation 13, the Antichrist said that.
I'm sorry?
Revelation 13, the false prophet.
Yep.
does that too, right? So like clearly he has the ability to do that.
Well, if given, I think it's
He's given the opportunity.
yeah, and so that was the distinction I was trying to make here that I wanted you to think about. Because if any of you ever read through this, that's bugged me before, and I've come to the same conclusion that God said you can do what you want to him, just don't touch him. You can go nuts. That's why I think it was a tornado. I think that Satan used God's power and just allowed a tornado to go through there. Because again, God controls nature. We've seen him calm the waves. And
if you look, even today, like if you go through like African countries and places where they do voodoo and witch doctors,
sure,
there's a reason why people believe it. It's because there are healings that happen.
sure.
These things happen, like demonic
And curses. I think that there's
Absolutely.
demonic. Absolutely.
Those things happen, so there is a power of darkness, and it's not completely new. Like it has the ability to deceive people, and people fall for those things, and it happens today. It's not something that's just like confined to the past. And I think going forward is going to continue to get worse, right? Like so, like when you see the devil does this thing, or demons do this thing, or there's some sort of false miracle that happens.
Mm-hmm.
There are supernatural beings that have ability.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
I think we're and I'm zero argument because I think the same way. I think what got me here is when it talks about fire from heaven, my brain automatically goes to further into the future where fire from heaven was called down by one of God's chosen, like the dude at the time. And so for me, I struggle a little bit just of the, wow, okay, he told Satan, do whatever you want to him, which in my book, based on what it says, included dropping fire from heaven that would just devour everything in the field. I do find it interesting, and there's no point here other than the interest of it, is how they kept knocking at the door and coming with bad news after bad news after bad news. How many of us would prefer, if you're going to give me bad news, just... My boss used to always talk about if we were going to go up to executives. This was Gary Heisey, a good friend of mine, one of my favorite Christian leaders, hard as nails, but just great dude, still a mentor. In fact, he's fighting cancer. He's 80. He's fantastic. Gary used to tell me, "Yeah, we're gonna go poke the bear once. We're take all the bad news, wrap it up, and take it." And yet, I wonder if part of the plan Satan had here was if he just had them keep knocking. Just as soon as he had lost all this, some other loss comes, and 4 times. And the last is his kids, which probably the rest of it probably didn't even matter at that point, but he had already mentally and physically been dealing with, can you imagine what the dude's blood pressure and everything else just off the chart at this point by the time that 4th knock on the door came. And so I have speculated that was also part of the plan, that Satan was going to do everything, which if they all one guy showed up and just walked them through all of it, still horrible, unbelievably. But just as the end of one, he's like, just starting to take a breath, another one, and another one. And then you got to wonder, right before the kids, when he's at that third one, he's like, okay, what's next? And then, of course, it was his children. All right.
Scott, just one point from
Yeah.
personal experience.
Please.
Growing up in India, I've experienced physical force by these demonic powers because my family was into all this idol worship. So I've carried the little platform and I'm by 4 guys. After I became a believer, I really wanted to test it. So they invoke the spirit, and these 4 guys get moved around like crazy, and I felt the physical force. It got heavier once the invocation happened. So they know, because people use that to divine, to find water underground.
Sure.
And these physical demonic forces know where it is, and they can point the waters where to drill the well, and then people want to decide whether they want to take a job or an alliance, marriage alliance.
Sure.
So they, in their mind, they know, I choose that corner as a nest, this corner as a no. And this 4 people don't know anything about this person asking. They'll get this person in between and they'll drag them to that corner.
Interesting.
I felt that.
Sure. And I believe we overlook it, especially in our country, because we've got all the technology and everything else. Yes, please.
You said it, but I think it needs to be emphasized that the devil is God's devil. He can only do what God permits. And I think as you refer to the continued new atrocities that happen to him, I think he paints a picture of this is the worst thing you can possibly imagine. And there's where the story starts.
Yeah. Yeah, fair. Very fair. All right, so
Scott, just,
please.
Two other thoughts on the.
Yeah, please.
So my ESV says the fire of God fell from heaven. First of all, the word heaven is overloaded, right? It often just means the air, the atmosphere.
Fair.
It could mean
Okay, fair.
or it can mean the abode of God.
Yeah. And I was talking about the fire that God drops, and I was relating it.
To Elijah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where my mind went with this.
But the other thought is that this is a statement by the servant. So in the servant's eyes, fire fell down from the sky. There's no other being that can do that in his mind except
Sure.
God. So this is his quote.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Okay, last one, and then I'm going to move on, or we're going to blow my hour right out of the water.
I've also heard in this instance, I don't know, could be whatever. But,
Go ahead. We love you. It's okay.
Lightning, right? We use.
Yeah, you're wrong there, but I'll let you say it.
Fire from heaven, and it will create a fire.
You're correct. But to consume if it had said it zapped them all dead, or because again, whoever's you like that, whoever's writing here that we're going to talk about in a second, when they say it consumed, I've never heard lightning and consume. I get where you're coming from because that's absolutely hot. I've seen it do some crazy stuff to trees and it'll knock you dead. But yeah,
that was just one thing that I've heard. Again.
No, I said last one. What do you want, Tom? No, go ahead.
My Bible says.
Hold on. He's still talking. Sure.
Right. To me, that is poking the bear. Once that I have in the past read that as a small mercy from God for Job.
Interesting.
It's all happening at once for you, as opposed to say over the course of a week or a month.
Fair.
Getting all of that spread out.
Yeah, fair. And I can see it both ways. Yeah. No, it's absolutely a great one. Yeah. Go ahead, Tom. And now no one's talking on this. I have to move on, or I'm just going to pray here in about 15 minutes.
It says God's fire fell from heaven. It burned the sheep. It doesn't say consumed. So does your version?
Mine said devoured. No, it said devoured. Because I just read it.
Would burn the sheep. It wouldn't necessarily
Don't protect his words.
And it blazed up against the sheep.
Lightning could also set the ground on fire in that.
Okay, it said burned, and it devoured. It said burned the sheep and servants and devoured them. So okay.
We're missing something here.
Yeah, we're going way too slow. Yes, thank you. Thank you, George. George is right. I don't even know what he said. All right, so let's get into the physical side. So, Wendy, can I pick on you again? Would you read just the verse 1 through 6 for me of chapter 2, please? 1 through 6 of chapter 2.
Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "From roaming about on the earth and walking around on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? For there is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil. And he still holds fast his integrity, although you incited me against him to ruin him without cause." And Satan answered the Lord and said, "Skin for skin, yes, all that a man has, he will give for his life. However, put forth your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face." So the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, he is in your power, only spare his life."
And verse 6, please. Oh, sorry, I was looking at 7's in the middle there. I'm going to finish it. So Satan left the Lord's presence and inflicted Job with terrible boils from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery to scrape himself while he sat among the ashes. And then there's some other stuff after that, lots of it. But I want to talk just for a minute about this physical affliction. I love how Satan's like, yeah, but anybody would, they do anything to save their own life. And I'm not going to ask this, I'm going to talk this to myself, but I probably know the answer for everybody in here. If you said your wife and kids, but you get to live, and all your possessions, and they can keep them all, I'm like, take me. I don't care how you do it. I don't want to be tortured, but I'll take anything. Don't touch my wife and kids. I mean, I find that that he says that because this is God. So he knows. Now here you can get into a really interesting conversation because in my brain I go down some really weird rabbit paths. Christy will attest.
We can attest.
Yes. So God's all powerful. He created Satan. When Satan comes to him, he's going, this character again. I mean, I've already dealt with him. What else am I going to do? When he says, oh, well, anybody, got to be going, yeah, you're so full of beans. And it's like, okay, don't kill him, but have at it. Now, I don't know about you, and I picture when Satan leaves, he's walking away smug going, all right, let's try this time because I was wrong the last time. That picture, you know how Wayne will paint it for me. When I was reading this, my brain was painting. This wasn't God going, oh, well, okay, you can do that. It was more of, yeah, I knew you were going to come back and do this, you lunatic. Okay, fine. I'm going to prove you wrong again because I know my servant, because I created him too, and I made him to worship me, and he's just better at it than you were because he's not gotten selfish and all that. You've taken all his stuff, fine. You want to attack his flesh? Go for it. Let's see where that leads. And that's, I framed it different in my brain because growing up, it was always Satan showed back up and came up with another idea. I'm like, this is God he's talking to. This isn't one of us trying to trick the other, although I'm sure that was in his brain to get one over on God, thinking he knew more about how a human was going to respond, Job in particular, than God did. And I found that fascinating as I thought through that. So I thought I would share that tidbit from the twisted brain that is mine. All right, what's next? Any questions on that? We good? Good. All right. Where? This one is interesting. So no one actually has this exactly. I'm going to stay on this side so I can point at my slides and talk about it. It is not Uzbekistan, but I just put that up there in case anybody besides me went, hey, that's got UZ at the beginning. We don't really have an exact, but we have some clues. And I like this from Swindoll. He said, hey, based on customs, and I found this a lot of places, but it was a really concise quote of, you got the vocabulary and the references and geography and natural history and all the things that were going on around that it'd be more Northern Arabia. And as I looked through, and there were some really interesting ones that I didn't put up here that had us all over the map. But based on geography, based on all the things they talk about in that area, and that Moses lived in Midian, which was near the land of Uz, and that's going to come back up here in a minute. Everything I got, as you can see, they put it in the same rough geography, and it almost has to be based on that Moses lived near it. It couldn't just be off in Uzbekistan. Any questions on that? Because that was pretty straightforward. I think the where, while there's no place called Uz anymore, there's pretty strong indications that it was right in that area, just up above the Red Sea. Good. I'm starting to like Ryrie more and more because he agrees with me.
He lived in the area to the southeast of the Dead Sea.
Yeah.
And this is where we get the term "news guys."
Oh. Wendy, I'm telling you. For the record, Steve, you out punted your coverage just unbelievably there. All right. You ever heard me say that one? Most of the guys in this room, for the record, we've almost all out punted our coverage. Now, I got a sidebar because it's your fault that I'm rabbit trailing. I made the comment. We went to a wedding. My best friend, John Tognan, we've been best buddies for 35 plus years, 37, 38, Chris, something like that. Christian introduced us. They were friends. They went to high school. And when we got married 35 years ago, we got married in February, and he and his wife, Diana, got married in May. And we have run together. We've raised our kids together. Good Christian man. We're staying at the back. And there's this young man named Matt. Matt was a very sweet guy, big, married. He had his beautiful wife, but he's kind of a lunatic. I mean, he's me young with even more mouth. He is out on that dance floor singing at the top of his lung. And he was part of the party, and they all went to A&M together, so something's wrong with him anyway. But he had one button left, and he's got a little belt. He's just out there, and he comes over. Literally, he's sweating, and he's not drinking except water to not die. he comes over, and his wife was so loving. She's sitting there, and he's like, oh, and you could see, and she starts buttoning his shirt back, and basically like, honey, you need to calm down a little bit. It was the perfect picture of why God loves, where I'm going with this, why God loves his men more than you ladies. I know he loves y'all too, but he gives us y'all, and I'm telling you, I'm sorry, he likes me more than he does you for some odd reason. It is not a fair exchange. All right, so we're good there. All right, I'm staying on track. I am so excited. All right, let's talk about this because we're going to bog down right here. This was for me because you're a kid. I carried around a little notebook because I'd have ideas of, I want to say this because it'll be clever and it'll make Thomas's head spin around or something. So I'd write stuff down. But the book itself was probably written either, and these are just my two. I picked two. There was all kinds of, anonymous is the number one answer but there were enough biblical scholars. Now, there were some guys that just know the Bible, but I had never heard of, and when I went and started looking at some of their stuff, I just ejected it from my mind because, man, there's some crazy people out there writing about our book, or about God's book. But it's either during Moses, my opinion, it's either during the time of Moses around 1440 BC or Solomon around 950. And this is speculative. There is not a verse in the Bible that directly says who it is. So one reason that I consider Moses, as you can read, is he lived close. He wrote a whole bunch of the stuff in our Old Testament. I mean, the dude was prolific. He wrote Genesis, and he wrote a lot of things that we read. He could naturally be. Now, the problem I have with Moses is the style is not his style. It is not Moses type. Doesn't mean that God couldn't give him some poetry, because this thing reads like poetry. But, and this is Scott's pick, that if I have to pick an author, I think it's Solomon. It's the wisest man who's ever lived. So he's definitely heard the story. He interacted with everybody. And I would like for somebody to grab Job 7, 1 through 17 for me. And I want somebody else to get Ecclesiastes 7, 1 through 9. And because I want to share these. And I know the first one's a little lengthy, but I think it really pulls together what I'm trying to get across. Job 7, 1 through 17. Who's got that?
I got Job 7, 1 through 17.
Would you read that for us, please?
Has not man a hard service on earth, and are not his days like the days of a hired hand? Like a slave who longs for the shadow, and like a hired hand who looks for his wages. So I am allotted months of emptiness, and nights of misery are a portion to me. When I lie down, I say, when shall I rise? But the night is long, and I toss and turn till the dawn. My flesh is clothed with worms and dirt. My skin hardens, then breaks out afresh. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle, and come to their end without hope. Remember that my life is a breath. My eye will never again see good. The eye of him who sees me will behold me no more. While your eyes are on me, I shall be gone. As the cloud fades and vanishes, so he who goes down to Sheol does not come up. He returns no more to his house, nor does his place know him any more. Therefore, I will not restrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Am I the sea or a sea monster, that you set a guard over me? When I say, my bed will comfort me, my couch will ease my complaint, then you scare me with dreams and terrify me with visions, so that I would choose strangling and death rather than my bones. I loathe my life. I would not live forever. Leave me alone, for my days are a breath.
Wow.
What is man that you make so much of him, and that you set your heart on him?
Thank you so much. Excellent. All right. Gave everybody time. Could somebody give me Ecclesiastes 7, 1 through 9?
Yeah, I got it.
Thanks.
A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to the heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It is better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fools. This also is vanity. Surely oppression drives the wise into madness, and a bribe corrupts the heart. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the heart of fools.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. Could y'all hear? I know those are big passages, but I wanted it to have some volume versus just a couple of verses. Did you hear? I mean, you could swap those. If you didn't know the story of Job and you hadn't read through Ecclesiastes, and you just read those verses back to back, would you say, from the way it sounds, same dude probably wrote that? Fair? I mean, I do. Now, I'm going to argue against myself of why I think it's, if you got to pick a writer, that's who I'm picking. I'm going to go with it. Wisest man in the world. He'd had access to all that. He's in the right lineage. I mean, Solomon would have heard the story. God could have put it on his heart. Hey, you're going to write all this other stuff, because he wrote a whole bunch of that wisdom stuff that we get out of our Bibles. I mean, that was his thing. This fits. Everybody that I read and all the stuff I looked at is Job is looked at as a wisdom piece of literature, and it's very poetic when you read through, especially when he's going back and forth with his buddies. And there's a reason I call them buddies. We're going to talk about that next time. That they're maybe not as bad as you think they are. But that back and forth is so almost sing-song. They're very poetic in the way that they talk to each other. And as soon as I read it this time, and I had thought it before, but man, when I was really studying, I was like, I kept going over to Ecclesiastes and reading, and I go back and go, man, these dudes sound, yeah.
I've been studying the Psalms personally,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, a lot of the language sounded more like the Psalms of David than the Ecclesiastes. But of course, being the son of
Sure.
David, Solomon would have heard a lot of his father's Psalms.
Well, and didn't Solomon, guys, keep me straight, he wrote a couple of Psalms, right? Aren't there 2 or 3 that are pointed to him? So, yeah, I mean, definitely, he'd have probably read his dad's writings. So I have to think, I've always thought that Solomon was influenced heavily by his father's writings. I know, I mean, y'all have heard me talk about my dad. My dad's life and the things he told me definitely influenced. I've shared his wisdom a bazillion times. So, no, fair. Anything else in that before I say my struggle against having, and Moses fits too just because he wrote so much Old Testament, but it doesn't fit his voice. Yeah, please. Yes, and so I didn't put that in here because we're actually going to talk about him here. No, and I was hoping somebody'd bring it up. So Elihu's the younger guy that comes along at the end. You got the 3 guys that God's going to slap upside the head. I did that. I got him. When he's done, when God shows up and takes the mic later. But there's also somebody that comes alongside and really has more comforting words than the buddies. And he was not reprimanded by God. And he would have lived. And one of the reasons I say Job didn't write it is because it talks about his own death, and it's really hard to write about your own death when you're dead. But he is definitely a considered person that at least maybe captured it or passed that on to his kids, and then somebody wrote it because he put it down. It's definitely an option. I also lean towards anonymous because if we believe these words are true and just, which I know everyone in here, and they're infallible, that they wrote and talked to each other in these sing-song, almost the eloquence of the time and everything else. We'll get into some of that next week of how they interacted with each other, because culturally, maybe they aren't as bad as we think they are because we're applying them to our culture and not their culture and time. But we'll look at that. But yes, that's definitely a strong one. I'm going to bring that up again, and I'm glad you just brought it up. I was wondering if anybody would throw that out there, because that's absolutely a strong third candidate. And then, of course, the one that I saw a lot was it's really anonymous. We don't have a clue who really did it. But there's hints. Solomon, if he said, hey, you have to pick somebody, I'm going to put my money on Solomon. And when we get to heaven, I'm going to ask, hey, was I right, wrong? You know, and then he's going to say, no, this guy named Jojo, we had him write it, but we didn't like his name, so we just left it out. And so, all right. So,
get back JoJo?
Exactly. And man, so here's the funny thing. When I put this together, I was like, I'm only got like 10 I'm going to be done in 15 minutes. Yeah, I'm an idiot. I know most of y'all know that. So, are you for real? Is it a real person or allegory? And we're going to hit this pretty high, and I may start next time if we don't get good conversation on this because I'm going to end on time. The main argument that it's a real person is not a real person is because of all this poetic style that these guys talk to each other. It's like Shakespeare, you know, they're great plays, but nobody talked exactly. I mean, Shakespeare made words up, for crying out loud. I mean, come on, it can't be a real person. Not when you read Job over and over. There's no way these people interacted this way. Oh, and it starts off in the throne room of God, and Satan's going, hey, you know, I've been all over your world. And he's like, have you considered my servant Job? Come on, this has all got to be a bunch of hooey, right? It's meant for us to, it's historically valid. God put it in the Bible, but it's allegory. And by the way, we have somebody on staff at this church who believes that it is allegory, just so y'all know, because I've had a few interesting conversations. So I'm going to hit this one real easy. The book talks about a prose poetry, prose structure. It's extended poetic dialogues. There are scholars who argue the structures suggest a crafted theological drama, not a transcript of real conversation. Note, biblically based folks in my study, though, all three of these books, they believe what I believe, which is this was a real human being that walked the earth. And I'm going to tell you why I believe that. So, real person. And I put this because this was what I thought of when I'm afraid to put my trust in you. That was to come talk in this group. I fully believe he's a real person because in Job 1:1 it says, there was a man. And I'm going to stand over here, it's easier for me. It says, there was a man. And it matches other historical narratives in the Old Testament when they introduce people. So in Samuel 1:1 it said, there was a certain man from this place. And he was one of those from the hill country of that place whose name was Bucket, son of Jeroham. I know that one. And then in Judges, it says, there was a man of Zorah of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah. We see that repeated through the Old Testament, that they said, there was a man. And none of them are just poetic or anything else. They are talking about a true and real person. I couldn't find an episode where they said it this way, that it wasn't a person. So that's the first one. But then it also, when it talks about Job 1 and 2, I have the phrase, the sons of God, just like back in Genesis. And I told you I'd bring that up again. When he's doing that, they're talking about real people. It's not like they just made this up for the first time. That has been used. So it's okay to think that God gave the writer, this is how this came about. Does that make sense? Because we got a lot of that. I mean, do you think, when they wrote Genesis, he wasn't there. Somebody had to tell him. So, but you've got a mention of a specific place, Uz, and it's called out from Moses that he lived near it for 40 years. So it's a real place. Yes, we don't have a place, and no, it's still not Uzbekistan, but it's a real place that existed at the time. Just like there are places that come and go here. There's little towns all over Texas that are just about blowing away that may not exist in 100 years. They may not even. Nobody's got anything but a historical record of them, just like this. Job's lifespan is given. Why do that in just a story? Why say he lived another 140 years after the story's over? The story's over. God's fixed everything, or restored. Fixed is the wrong word. He's restored him and then some. But then they say, oh, and he lived another 104 years, and he blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you can say, okay, it's a happy ever after. Don't buy it. It fits too many of the other things we see. Then we're going to see God will address Job directly, just like he did a few others in the Old Testament. He flat out shows up and takes the mic. We'll talk about that. And then the number one reason, though, the number one, and this one, in my opinion, completely destroys it, and I am going to give Thomas a little credit here, but don't let it go to your head. In Ezekiel, it says, even these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Job. Why would he include Job if not real? Thomas and I said, the one thought, he said, it'd be like saying, Thomas, Scott, and the Easter Bunny are going to come to your house for dinner. Doesn't make any sense. And then it's again in James 5:11 in the New Testament, you have heard of the perseverance of Job and have seen the purpose of the Lord. Again, he liked to refer back to real people in the Old Testament. If not, he just made the story up. You know what I mean? So I have no doubt Job is a living human being. They presented it, and that's why I think it could be Solomon. The way it was written is very poetic and very wisdom. That's a wisdom writing like he did with his Ecclesiastes stuff. So that's iffy. I care who wrote it, but it's not that important because God didn't tell us. But I am very serious about Job as a real human being and walked the earth and went through this in person. Okay, I am 1 minute over, which is perfect. We can have a little conversation. I'll bring this slide back next week. And so that takes us. Next week we'll step on the gas. We talk about Job. They not be as bad as you think they were, or maybe they will. Thank you for not walking out. And second, Christy's probably very proud of me that this is the first car reference I've made in the entire thing. I'm a huge car nut. So that I didn't say anything until my closing slide, my wife will be like, that was very good of you, honey. I did. Shoosh. It was a Corvette. I did, and you're right. Well, it wasn't in the slide. That was off the cuff, which is very me. And I had some references I wanted to grab, but go ahead. Did she what? Vetted? She did not. No, and because I know I got it. I will say I did that on purpose because one, I love my wife dearly, but she is way smarter in this stuff than I am. And I knew if we sat down and went through it, I'd have to redo them for like the fourth time. Because I was pinging him yesterday. I said, because I've taught before, it's usually one time and I've pretty got it down. This one, man, I just kept going back to these slides and I didn't like this way. And so yesterday, I pinged him. I said, I plan to sit down and do a 30-minute read through. I said, I have rearranged these things for 3 hours. It was ridiculous. I knew all I wanted to say, but I didn't like my pictures, so I made them funnier, and then I took those off because I had some I thought were inappropriate. And so anyway, we wind up here. Let me close us in prayer. God, you are awesome. Thanks for letting me share because I get excited when we talk about some of this stuff. And for some reason, Job is always on. It's just that book that you've given us that for some reason resonates with me. And maybe it's because I like the way Solomon writes, whether he did it or not. It's in that prose. And we just ask that you would help us take this to heart, that you take care of your people, even when we're in the midst of the worst thing we could possibly imagine. May we never go through anything like this, and if we do, may you be right there next to us. Ask your blessing on this group in Jesus' name. Amen.